Now I would like to give the floor back to Paolo Roberti di Sarsina, because he is going to be talking about a very significant topic of medicine centered on the individual and salutogenesis. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. I bring the greetings of the Bologna Association of Doctors, which again this year has sponsored this meeting. The Bologna Medical Association has a special role to play, and I'm not saying this because they're sponsoring today's meeting, but it's because they are very strict about supporting non-conventional medicine, what we would call complementary medicine, which as medicine cannot be complementary from an epistemological point of view. We pay great attention to expertise, to rigorous training, and hence the reliability of our colleagues who plan to speak about health. And so it's a pleasure for me to be able to greet you on behalf of the Bologna Medical Association, because the initiative, including Giorgio Terzani's social initiative, what he called social accountability, of what he is presenting and proposing and focusing his research and development. And we think that there is a great deal of accountability, and for that reason sponsored the meeting. I also bring greetings on behalf of our charity, of whom Giorgio and Francesco Martin are members, of the Association of Non-Conventional Medicine in Italy, and various key features of the topics which will be dealt with today, which do not necessarily talk about the same topics, but have a leitmotif specifically related to each speaker, and are linked in because today we are tackling a dramatic problem, which is the social problems linked to medicine. If we can just look at the first slide. You can see from this cartoon by a famous American cartoonist, which was published in Newsweek. As we can see, I have an idea. Let's drug half the population. And then the other guy says, I have a better idea. Let's everyone pay us for those drugs. I have the best idea. Let's call it medicine. This is the problem. Medicine.
C'è oggi un problema sociale. Qual è l'apporto?
These ways of looking at medicine, the current status of looking at medicine, because we must say that we have to refocus on what is science, and obviously this is neither the place nor the time to reformulate the paradigms of research or the research which the World Health Organization has led to this dominant health system. So what is health? How can we produce health? Who is responsible for health, collectively and individually? Can we claim that today's medicine, today's health organization is pursuing the target of health rather than treatments, which are obviously essential. We can't forget the sixth Hippocrates oath. If there is love for a human being, then there will be love for science. So we need to return to reasoning in terms of social medicine. Social medicine, and realize the devastation of the side effects, the enormous side effects, despite the benefits which can be ascribed to the dominant organization of the medical system. The rationalist medicine, which has removed anything to do with human beings as whole individuals. Why did Einstein write, the last thing he wrote before he died, signed Russell's appeal against nuclear proliferation? You forget that this is the problem, and we all need to refocus on what it means to produce health and not just to treat disease. The devastating incidence of chronic disease, the enormous waste of resources, the conflicts of interest, the enormous conflicts of interest in medicine. With Attilio Speciani and others, when the problem of conflicts of interest arose within the World Health Organization research group over vaccines, Attilio will remember, we needed to increase in our local health trusts. We need to focus on empowerment. No, the first thing is to a correct, honest and sincere approach and information to all on what citizens express and their entitlement to health. Otherwise we shall never fulfill Article 32 of the Italian Constitution. We cannot invoke this article when it's convenient to us. So the problem is how to produce health, which is not prevention, which is not better lifestyles, it's producing health. And it is no coincidence that one of the theorists of this very old concept, Antonovsky, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, why are there resilient characteristics which give some of us better defenses against mental and physical insults? So it's a social problem on how to understand our actions and how we can manage ourselves and give meaning to what happens and to be able to understand. This sense of coherence, which is lost when we are ill, when we are divided into bits, sometimes inevitably into study parts. Obviously this is necessary, but we need to bring back the human being to the focus, the central core of medicine. The illustrious colleagues which will speak today will bring their contributions, but the binding force is this. So how can we harness these forces and put pressure on families and schools as sources of health, to be proactive with respect to the social content which, if they are lost, will lead to the dissolution, social dissolution and economic ruin. For the fact that instead of spending enormous quantities of money on medicine, many medicines should be thrown away, and we should invest in other things, in better things, because we don't have resources for research. Here again, we come back to the extraordinary contribution that action can be made in a social scale, voluntary work, and contributions. One of the major things we focus on are different attitudes to disease. Current attitudes see disease as something negative. From childhood, everything is focused on repression in every way. Any sign of illness, the multiplication of vaccinations meets this philosophy. I'm not saying that certain vaccination programs should not be implemented and used. What I'm saying is that we need to be well informed on all the risks and benefits, including conflicts of interest. I'm not saying that this will not have consequences. We need immediate action. Diseases aren't enemies to be annihilated on a military scale, but they must be construed as a point of reflection because they are part of our bio, mental and spiritual development. Here and now, there were reasons in the past, in the distant past, in history taken, there are reasons for disease, but we need to look for binding factors which are to do with the individual person. So these key factors need to be the focus of attention of decision makers. And I will conclude because we started late and I'd like to keep to my time frame with a few more remarks. Can medicine become genetic health? A transformation of this kind would mean a change in paradigm by all the so-called health operators. Without this radical change, it will simply a cosmetic operation in terms of generating health. It would be a caricature of this ancient approach, which needs to become a contemporary approach. Let's not forget, as I said before, that the dominant medicine today, referring to the dominant medical system, is interested above all in disease. But we also need to reflect on what health is. When disease is overcome, we think that health services have done their duty, but this is not the case. Health is not simply absence of illness. The problem is that medical training and health operator training largely lacks a health generative, proactive focus, which is not to do with having pity, which is not to do with solidarity, but to do with compassion for the suffering of a sentient being. So we believe that non-conventional medicine focused on the individual, as I said, is the major contribution to the work done in Italy by a handful of people whose consciences were shaken at some point in time, not only through basic research, but we also need clinical research to carry forward ways of reassessing medicine based on efficacy, evidence-based medicine. The doctor's task is to have a global responsibilizing effect, to be careful to make understandable and meaningful and accessible in terms of language the principles of generating health. These principles can transform modern medicine. They can reverse the current trend and put health at the center of research in local planning and in environmental planning in the workplace. Taking on individual responsibility, which requires a sign of the times. Not only responsibility for what we eat, but what water we drink, the bread we eat. I remember a congress I had the honor of attending. We even talked about what water we were drinking, what bread we are eating. The problem is not simply a question of populations dying of hunger and thirst because the Western world takes no interest in the problem. But for us, who are lucky enough to live in this part of the world, we need to be responsible. So, I think that understanding the future of humanity and our shared skills and efforts, we are all here today because in some way we are all interlinked with these elements. And I think I would like to end by showing you some cartoons from the Chest Medical Journal. If we can see the next one. I love Nazca. Can I have your autograph? Sorry, kid, I'm a doctor. I'm sorry, lady, we can't cover you because you have a pre-existing condition. What pre-existing condition? You're poor. Here we are. This guy was awake at work. He keeps falling asleep on the job. Where does he work? He works for the FDA. Medical errors. Nonsense. Your hysterectomy was a complete success. But I came in for a tonsillectomy. It may cause dizziness, stroke, vomiting, diarrhea. Yikes. Which drug is that? They're talking about tap water. The problem of the quality of non-medical staff in irrigating healthcare. Nurses need to offer their help. They are a fundamental alliance. We need to work with all health operators. Here we see another cartoon. This is amazing. Here we have the Facebook fanatic. No, I just posted her CT scan on Facebook. I've dizzy, nauseous and vomiting. How long have you been working in a health insurance company? Mom, am I fat because I have a poor diet and lack of exercise? No, rubbish. You just have a cold because in America an article was published saying that obesity in kids was linked to the common cold virus. We can now use radio frequency tags to find lost surgical sponges. And the colleague dressed up as a deep-sea diver because, fortunately, rarely, they sometimes forget. And this is the last cartoon. How many unnecessary procedures do we have in the health system that may well end up overwhelming us all? And the problem of work overload and stress in health organizations. You don't look so good. Can I call a nurse? I am the nurse. Thank you very much.
che non può che essere condiviso e dal punto di vista
We can but share what, as a journalist, the importance of promoting among health operators and the public circulation of correct information. Here there's a terrible gap. And also in social terms, because in terms of primary prevention, very often we speak to the sick as patients. And instead of turning these patients into people, we need to improve, we have to improve their lives and to try to be less ill and enjoy their lives more with the help of the